Okay, Sarah, thanks for joining us today. Can you briefly talk about what you do as an occupation and why I've asked you here today?
Sure. I am a multimedia journalist for a local news station, and my job is basically as a reporter, I go out into the field every day. It's my job to tell a story. So I am a one-man band, I'm a multimedia journalist, and I go out to do the interviews, shoot all of the footage, and then come back with a story that I tell from start to finish. So I write the story, edit the package, and then it's ready to be put onto your local news.
Sorry, so rude of me. My name's Johnny. I'm a student at St Mary's University.
Thank you for
Nice to
having
meet you.
me.
Sorry, that's what we do in Scotland. So anyway, the reason I asked you here today is we are talking about, specifically in your graduate class at the moment, we're talking about how schools deal with the media and the media interest at school that the news have, and stories about the school, whether good, bad or indifferent, and how as public officials and representations of the school we go about dealing with the media. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions based on that. So firstly, will you kind of talk about maybe a couple of instances that you've been involved with schools, or when you've been asked to go out to schools, or generally most of the time what a school would call you about?
Sure. Usually it's the other way around. Usually it's us calling the school about an instance. Sometimes we will get press releases about special events that are happening at the school, and we're encouraged to come to those. Obviously, the school is always going to want good publicity, so if there's something good going on, we'll hear about it from the officials. But if it's something that is maybe not so good, and not necessarily a bad thing on the school's part, but just something, for example, a couple weeks ago I went out to a school where they were on a soft lockdown. There was a threat made towards the school, and they were a little bit unsure. They didn't have any visuals or didn't perceive an immediate threat to the students, but still a soft lockdown is something that can be scary. Not necessarily something that you want publicized, but nonetheless it is something that's newsworthy to us as a local news station. And so it was my job to go out there and check out what was going on. When I got there, I did see 2 patrol units on the campus of the school. Went up to the building, they let me in, they knew who I was, but I was asked to leave because they were on a soft lockdown and they weren't giving out any information at the time. So sometimes it's for good things, sometimes it's for things that maybe not so good, but nonetheless, it's always our job to tell those stories, good or bad.
Now, as a news station, do you have like a representative that you would usually get in touch with? Is there someone you would know, they would know you by first name basis, you would know them, and how does that process work?
Sure. So for the larger school districts, they always have what we call a PIO, a public information officer, and they're the person that we contact first for any type of news that we have with the school district. They're our first point of contact. And they'll usually, if they can't help us personally, they will put us in touch with the right person that we need to be speaking with. Now, for the smaller school districts, we usually deal firsthand with the superintendents because they don't necessarily have that PIO position in a smaller school district. So if it's a smaller district, we're usually talking to the superintendent first, and then he or she will delegate us and kind of transition us to where we need to go based on what the story is and who we should be talking to.
Okay, thank you. So in the book that we're kind of going over this, and this part of our class, it kind of advises us as PIOs, as you call it there, to be on a first name basis with the reporters, to know their first name, know a little bit about them, keep the relationship good. The kind of impression I got with that is that they're the ones that are responsible for making it a good spin-off for your school, or on the other hand sometimes a negative spin-off. So how would you react to kind of that piece of information? Is that true, or what would you say about that?
Sure, I think that a lot of times there's this perception that a reporter or a news station can determine the way that they tell a story, and while that's true, it is our job to put a story together. It's never our intention to put any sort of spin on it. Actually, as journalists, we take an oath to be unbiased, and that is our #1 priority in any story that we tell. We're simply there to give information to people in the community, and they can take that information and decide for themselves whether they deem that something positive, negative, or anything in between. It's not really our job to decide whether something is good or bad or give it any sort of label, really. It's just simply our job to get the information out there.
Now, if it was a negative story and, say that there was a kind of some type of scandal involving a teacher-student inappropriate relationship or something like that, would you generally go to the school first, or would that be a story that you would kind of negatively tell because you want, it's newsworthy, as you said?
Yeah, so once again, I don't think that I would have any intention of going there to try and put a negative spin on that story, while the connotation of that story in and of itself is negative, and that's never something that's good for a school district or just for a student or the teacher involved. I would definitely seek out the school district to try to get their side of the story and to get the full story, right? At the end of the day, my job is to get the entire story. So in a situation like that, it would mean contacting the school district, attempting to get in touch with that student's family, trying to give them an opportunity and a platform to give their side of the story, and also contacting local officials, because at that point there would be an investigation, and the law enforcement would have to become involved at that point.
So you would try and get all different sides of the story before you put your own package together?
Exactly.
Okay. And then lastly, we have a lot of lovely teachers in our classroom, and what would you say would be a kind of good way for them, to keep stuff as positive as possible, and kind of probably more important, to keep relationships with the news, who, obviously at the moment the news stations and news reporters in general probably don't have the best reputation in the United States. So what would you say is a good way for the teachers to keep that as a positive relationship with the newscasters?
Sure. I think first I have to kind of defend my craft a little bit and say that while there are some people and some journalists out there who do give the rest of us a bad name and maybe aren't so good about being unbiased in their storytelling, I think that the majority of us like to take pride in the fact that we are. So I think don't let the few that aren't determine your entire outlook on our field and what we do. Secondly, I think that at the end of the day, we're all trying to do a job, and I think most people in their job, they want to do it well. And I think that a big part of that for us is just simply trying to communicate with you all. If you're not willing to work with us, that at the end of the day is making our jobs harder, and we're not trying to make anyone's life more difficult than it needs to be. But that being said, it's always nice to work with those school districts that are willing to give us the information that we need and willing to work with us to present that information in the best way possible to the public. Because at the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing. We all want our communities to be educated, informed, and safe. And I think that working together is the best way to achieve those goals.
Well, thanks, thank you for your time today, and we'll be in touch if we have any more questions. Thank you. In Scotland, we kiss to say goodbye to. Thank you.